So we are studying ecosystems, and what we're really focusing on is all the interactions in that ecosystem. That's what we want to be thinking. Anytime we look at an ecosystem or look at the natural world, we want to be trying to imagine all the different connections and interactions that are occurring. So remember, an ecosystem is basically just a place where living and non-living things interact. Here we have a lake ecosystem. I would imagine there's lots of living things. There's probably fish and frogs in this lake. I would imagine there's all sorts of other organisms living in the forest around here, mice, deer, maybe some bear. And then we've also got lots of non-living parts of this ecosystem. The water, the mountain, the clouds in the sky, the air that the organisms are breathing, the sunlight creating heat or cold. So lots of living and non-living things all kind of interacting in this ecosystem. Now, we are going to come back to the non-living parts of the ecosystem later. We're going to study the water cycle and the rock cycle and all those things and the atmosphere. For now, though, we really just want to focus on the living parts of the ecosystem, right? So only the organisms in that ecosystem. And what we're going to talk about today is the fact that different organisms in an ecosystem have different roles. They play different parts. So you should write this down. This is the title of our topic today. So this should be the title of your notes. And then you're going to want to write down these 3 bullet points. So first of all organisms, living things, need energy to live and reproduce. Without energy, we die. And also you should know that all the energy on Earth comes from the sun. Every last bit of energy comes from the sun. However, organisms get the energy they need in different ways. Obviously, I can't just get my energy from the sun, but there are some organisms that can. So we're going to talk about those different organisms that get their energy in different ways. So go ahead and copy this down into your notes, pause the video if you need to, and then you can replay it. Okay, so the first type of organism we're going to talk about is the producers. And again, all this should go in your notes. So after I finish talking, you should go ahead and write it down. So producers. Producers are really important parts of the ecosystems because they can produce their own food using the energy from the sun, right? They can create their own energy. They don't need to eat anything. They use this thing called photosynthesis, where we take carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight. That's all these trees and these plants need is water, air, and sunlight, and they can make their own food. That's pretty amazing. These are usually plants with green leaves. Those green leaves you could think of as little solar panels. They're collecting the sun's energy, they're sucking in carbon dioxide, they're sucking up water from the ground, and they can use those 3 things to magically create food. And we're going to talk more about photosynthesis later. All right, so make sure you've got all that written down before you move on. Now, consumers are our next type of organism. Unfortunately, consumers cannot create their own food. They can't produce their own food, but what they can do is consume or eat other plants and animals for their energy. Here we have a deer eating grass. So the grass here is a producer. It makes its own energy, takes the energy from the sun and makes its own food, and then the deer can come along and eat that grass. So in a sense, it's kind of eating sunlight, isn't it? Which is kind of interesting. So this deer is a producer. This deer is a consumer. This rabbit is also a consumer. It can't make its own energy, so it has to eat other things. In this case, it's eating a carrot. A carrot is a producer. It's orange, but it has green leaves. So it's able to get this rabbit is able to get the sun's energy by eating this carrot. All right, here's a wolf, and this is kind of gross, but it looks like he got a deer and he's walking around with his deer leg. This wolf cannot make its own energy, cannot make its own food. So it is going to consume this deer, which ate the grass, right? So we got the sun's energy allowing the grass to grow. The deer comes around and eats the grass, and then the wolf comes around and eats the deer. So the wolf is consuming this animal for energy, all right? But in reality, it's still getting the sun's energy. Remember, all energy comes from the sun. So go ahead and write down your definition for consumer before you move on. Our last type of organism is a decomposer. Now, decomposers are really interesting. How do they get their energy? Well, they can't make their own food. They're not a producer. What they do is they break down dead organisms and their waste to get energy. So they're not like the wolf where they're going to go out and they're going to, eat a deer. They're actually going to eat things or break them down that are already dead, which is great because otherwise we would have dead leaves and dead trees and dead animals piling up on us. These decomposers are able to break them down, suck out the last bits of energy, and break them back down and turn them back into soil. So we got lots of examples here, but you should understand that some fungi break down dead organisms, and some fungi actually break down the waste of dead organisms. So our first example is fungi. These are mushrooms. Um, Fungi break down dead wood, dead leaves. You see them in the forest all over the place, right? So they're not actually going out and hunting this tree. They're going to wait for it to die, and then they're able to kind of invade it and break it down. Earthworms are also a type of decomposer, right? They burrow through the soil where they eat little bits of dead material, right? Bits of leaves and wood and other animals that have already died. Up here we've got bacteria. Bacteria are a type of decomposer, but they're microscopic. They're so small that you can't see them unless you have a microscope. And they break down the bodies of dead organisms. And down here, we have what's called a dung beetle. Now, dung beetles are decomposers, but they don't break down dead organisms. What they do is they go and they find the waste of organisms and they eat the waste, right? So this dung beetle actually lives in Africa and it found some elephant dung or elephant, you know, poop, right? And it's going to take it back to its nest and it's going to feast on that elephant poop. Yum. Aren't you glad to not be a dung beetle? All right. So we've got producers, consumers, and decomposers. What are we? Are we producers? Can we produce our own food? No, obviously not. Are we decomposers? Do we break down things that are already dead? I don't think so. We're consumers, right? We can't create our own food, so we have to consume other plants and animals, right? We might eat a salad. We might eat some rabbit. We might eat some venison. We might eat a hamburger, which is a cow, right? So we are consumers. We have to consume our food to get energy. All right. So make sure you've got notes for your intro here, producer notes, consumer notes, and decomposer notes, and then you can move on to the next step in the Google Classroom.